you and I should pour one out for our dear old friend Twitter.
Not ready. I'm honestly, I'm going through the stages of grief. I've been in like mourning almost. It's been a wild thing because like denial, anger, all of those things. And I'm still in like slight denial. I'm still like waiting for someone to like save us from this.
I've been wanting to have this conversation with you because I think you and I can admit that a lot of our career
100%.
trajectory is owed to our use of that social media platform.
Yes.
And this week, over at The Verge, they've unveiled this series called The Year That Twitter Died. And one of the more fascinating articles that I read in this series.
To be fair, it didn't die. It was murdered, but whatever.
There is that. And in the series, there was a feature called How Twitter Broke the News. And for a decade, Twitter was the most powerful force in news. How did we let that happen? And the first paragraph is, here's a very dumb truth. For a decade, the default answer to nearly every problem in mass media communication involved Twitter. Breaking news, Twitter. Live sports commentary, Twitter. Politics, Twitter. A celebrity was behaving badly, Twitter. A celebrity has issued a Notes app apology for that bad behavior, Twitter. For a good while, the most reliable way to find out what a loud noise in New York City was involved asking Twitter. Was there an earthquake in San Francisco? Twitter.
Man,
is some website down? Twitter.
Yes.
The funny thing about that earthquake, remember, we here in North Carolina experienced a very small earthquake.
That was an epic Twitter day. Yes.
It really was. And that's the thing. We're sitting here laughing or remembering these, oh man, that was an epic Twitter day. But the part that really caught me was that first blurb. Live sports commentary.
Yes, definitely. And that's definitely why I gravitated to it initially. And it's definitely why I stayed on for so long and loved it. And it's like, it lets you comment on it live in your own voice and people either like it or they don't like it. And you can kind of like develop. I feel like I developed a lot of that through Twitter. I think it helped my writing as well. Like just because you don't want to just tweet anything, because why would people follow you if you just tweet anything? You have to like tweet stuff that people think is funny or insightful or whatever. So it pushes you almost. And I've always loved it for that. And the breaking news, of course.
I went and found your first tweet. This was from, or at least the ones you haven't deleted.
Oh, I'm dying. Okay.
This was April 14th, 2009.
Oh, okay.
Still trying to figure this thing out. This newfangled technology is starting to make me feel old a bit.
Well,
and then you had there's like dead links.
That was how many years ago now? 14 years ago.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. What is it? There's an old Twit pic. Remember there was Twit pic?
Oh yeah, Twit pic. That's dead now?
Yeah, the newest picture of Penny, almost 7 months old.
Oh, my puppy.
That's how old this
She's
is.
gone now.
I know. I don't have Ollie and Roy.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that's kind of how long it's been.
This was almost like it was almost like live journaling too. April 22nd, 2009. No loss tonight.
Please don't ever find my live journals.
This was at 12:43 in the morning on May 2nd. Never a bad time to rewatch Anchorman. Don't act like you're not impressed.
Oh boy. I mean, not wrong. I still enjoy that movie.
I went and found mine because I forgot that Twitter would prompt you like, what's happening? And then I don't know if I had tied them together where it was a Facebook, Twitter cross post.
I was going to say, because like I always would delete that on Facebook because I was like, this is stupid.
So
like
I think I would do cross
posts.
posts. I'm pretty clear that on March 13th, 2009, which is my first actual tweet.
Yes.
It says, Joe thought Seth Greenberg was going to give birth. And this is after they had I went and looked. I'm like, well, what happened?
You should have just kept tweeting in the third person, honestly.
Yeah, maybe I should have. March 13th, 2000. What happened? Oh, that was the ACC tournament down in Atlanta, Virginia Tech, UNC. They needed that win. They really needed that win. And that gave us another one of these Seth Greenberg, certifiably insane.
That was the Tyler Hansbrough fist pump celebration, right? Where he's like fist pumping down the court.
So I'm looking at this stuff, and I think I double tweeted that Seth Greenberg was going to give birth. So clearly I was doing some cross promotion here, or cross posting. And it was like, Joe thinks ACC hoops on a Friday night isn't complete without Cookout, Reese's Cups with fresh peanut butter. That's what's up.
That's what's up.
That's what's up.
I mean, jeez.
I was 30 years old.
Listen. I know. I'm like, what a dork when you read my tweets back. I'm like, dorks. What?
We're still dorks.
Totally accurate.
We are.
I'm like, this newfangled technology. I'm old. I was like I was like 26.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm ancient. Oh,
keep
boy.
that same energy, Brownlow. I think you and I still keep that same energy.
Yeah.
So the thing about Twitter, and the person who actually pushed me to get on Twitter was Bomani Jones, because he viewed it as the next way to.
And he was really good. He's always been great.
He's always been great on Twitter. His whole argument to me was, look, man, this is the best way to directly communicate with your audience. And I was thinking, well, no, that's blogs. Because you got to remember, we're old enough that we were forged in the fires of blogs.
True.
Because it was just remember when Twitter first started, it was positioned along with Tumblr as a microblogging platform.
Yeah.
We had the long form stuff. I was doing 850 the blog. I had developed a community in the message boards. I still keep up with people through social media that was formed in the comment sections of the old 850 the blog, which of course was born out of message boards. So these things are just new takes on things that had already been done. And this gets to why sports people are so, it's very hard for them to detach from Twitter, or they're so
I'm having a
desperate
very hard time
to find the next thing that can replace Twitter, because you remember a lot of careers were made from blogs.
Yeah.
A lot of the writers you love today actually came through from blogging. And then that
Fan House, Deadspin, Sports by Brooks.
Oh man, Sports by Brooks. That I read
Big Lead.
Jeff Pearlman did a really fascinating story on. He went and found Sports by Brooks.
I remember that. Yeah,
and he's like, some people just don't need to be found. That was his ultimate takeaway from tracking him down. And Brooks had resurfaced, and he kind of started oddly tweeting through it. So this is why folks like you and me and a lot of other people in our business have had a hard time either detaching ourselves from it, or, as you said, mourning the loss of Twitter. Because
it's just like anytime you want to fire a thought off, like what, you're not going to go on Facebook and be like, that feeling when your kid says whatever, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to share that with like all the people you went to high school with. And it's like, it's just nice to have a community of people that want to follow you for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really have that anywhere else, because like, what are you going to do? Turn down follow requests on Instagram from your friends that you maybe don't want reading your, and whatever. I mean, Twitter's a publicly accessible thing, but people can have the option of whether or not to follow you. It never hurts my feelings if one of my friends in real life doesn't follow me on Twitter, whereas like on all the other socials, it would, know? But
you just nailed it though. It was the directness and the text-based aspect of it. If you had a random thought in your head, you could just fire it off.
Yeah,
and no big deal. There was no you didn't need to know how to take a picture. You didn't need to know how to video edit. You didn't have to do a dance. There was none of this stuff that requires you, that extra step.
It's literally just like sending a text message.
Essentially, and it started off as a text message.
I never could do that. I tried a few times. I was like, never mind.
I always used the internet, like the website, the actual desktop version of it. And remember, there was also platforms that you could use, like apps you could use. I was a big Tweetbot guy back in the day. Twitterrific was a big one.
Was my Tweetbot and TweetDeck were really the only two I ever used.
So that direct line, I think, it's interesting. My 15-year-old Caleb said something to me the other day that I didn't think about in the time that he said it, but since he said it, it has been rattling in my brain since. And again, he's 15 years old, and he said to me, "Yeah, man, I'm kind of jealous." I'm like, "What are you jealous of?" It's like, you got to experience the internet when it was good. That's how he phrased it to me. Like, you were in the golden era of the internet.
And it is getting worse.
And I thought to myself, like, what does that mean? The internet's ready to, you're online all the time. But
it's not better.
His simple point was, everything is so fakey. Everything is so produced. There was a rawness to Twitter when it first started up. Remember, celebrities and athletes would get on and be like, "I'm making pancakes." I mean, like, he's just like us.
Where else are we going to find out that Kevin Durant has a burner account that he's using to like comment? Where else are you going to get that news? Where else would you even do that as an athlete, to like create these fake accounts? Like, think about how many funny sports stories have been born out of either athletes tweeting at people or using fake accounts, or coaches.
Speaking of news, if I asked you in the area, what was the most impactful tweet that set off a news firestorm that we're still dealing with the ramifications today? Because this Patel's argument on The Verge was that Facebook, and I agreed with his overall premise of the story on The Verge that I read and kind of inspired this conversation to angle it towards sports and local sports. his argument was, and the one that I agree with, is that Facebook ultimately was the thing that drove content and views. If you were in the news business,
yes,
you needed to go into the pool of Facebook to drive engagement.
And remember, like the video stuff as well. That was a huge thing on Facebook.
And there's a separate conversation about how Facebook was the thing that ultimately destroyed news today.
Yes.
Twitter never drove clicks.
That's
Twitter
the thing.
never drove engagement. However, the argument is that there was nothing more influential than Twitter. If you wanted to be in on the conversation, if you wanted to actually do some reporting based on talking to people directly, hey, DM's open. Twitter is the place where you went to do it.
Yes.
And an athlete could tweet something. You could see something problematic. You could pick from that and then transport it to what you would consider traditional media.
Right.
So with that in mind, a tweet in this area that actually was the most impactful tweet of all time in Triangle sports history. Do you know?
Like in sports history.
In sports history.
The Marvin Austin Club Live tweet?
Ding, 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 ding.
That's what I was.
May 29th, 2010. I live in Club Live.
Whatever.
So I get the tenant rate. Bottles coming like it's a giveaway. That is a Rick Ross lyric that was misinterpreted by fans, misinterpreted by media, and ultimately misinterpreted by the NCAA. And it set off a decades-long process in Chapel Hill involving, coaches getting fired, sanctions that may or may not happen. Roy knew.
The 2010 opener against LSU with like half the team out. It was wild. And they still almost won for some reason. It was a wild time. It really was. And it did. It set off a bunch of events that are still fresh on everyone's mind, honestly.
So that was the sweet, sweet nectar of news that you got off of Twitter. I remember that there was even a genre of sports Twitter here locally that you could turn into news, where you would take Twitter reactions from events.
Oh, I've done that.
And then embed them on a website. And then that's easy. Click.
People still do those.
It's crazy that people still do those. But a funny thing happened along the way. And I can tell this story now. It's been long enough and the people involved are no longer there. You know this story.
Oh, I do. Okay.
You know this story. I've just never really told the story. And this was the first instance where I started to wonder, is this good for us? Is it warping our brains? Is it giving us a sentiment that doesn't actually exist? That this sentiment is actually coming from a small group of people.
Right. Like that's the thing. Is it forcing us to misinterpret what public opinion is?
To your point, that those Twitter roundup stories still exist, and usually they're positioned as
BuzzFeed does them all the time.
And it's usually people are mad about this.
Or BuzzFeed's like the funniest tweets you've seen this month or whatever usually.
But the ones that were like, people are mad about X, right? And usually it was just like 5 people, 6 people. Or like, oh man, you're getting crushed. My take is getting crushed on Twitter. I can look at your mentions. You got like 5 people in your mentions that disagree with you. That does not mean you're getting crushed. You and I still know people that react to, oh man, I got like 3 tweets saying I was an idiot. Man, why don't you no. It's just 3 people.
Look, I've been guilty of it at times too.
Agree. But again, it took me a while to break free of that.
Right.
It really took me a while to break free of that. And the moment where it started to shift for me, I know the exact moment where I went, oh, people don't understand how the internet works. And this is not really the sentiment that exists. North Carolina, NCAA, they lose to Villanova.
Right.
Now, I did a Twitter roundup because that was peak Jordan meme at that time. Crying Jordan meme. And Jordan was in the house for that. Was in the house for that.
Yes.
And I took every Photoshop that I could find on social media and embedded them on the website.
See, that's just funny though.
And it's funny. It's funny. But you remember that during those times, there was a lot of, all right, Roy's got to go. Roy Williams has to go. They lost again.
To be fair, there were people that did that all the time.
And
that's where,
So as a joke, you remember this. As a joke, I basically did a story that said, look at these idiots who want to fire Roy Williams.
Right.
And I just took all these embeds of these people losing their minds over Roy Williams. Like, can you believe these dopes?
Right.
Can you, a 2-time national champ, can you believe these idiots?
Yeah. And they just like literally lost the national title game, but it's
losing
fine.
their minds, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, somebody in the building looked at that and thought it was a real sentiment. So they published a Facebook poll that said, should Roy Williams be fired?
Okay, yeah.
Remember that?
Yes.
You remember that one? And that's when it dawned on me. And I'm not saying this as like a way to like, can you believe this person did this? It made me go, oh, wait a minute. People don't quite understand sometimes there's a parlance, there's a way about the internet that you can point and laugh that this isn't a real
and
sentiment.
I think people that were on Twitter a lot, like you and I and others, like we all came to understand that and get that like, look, we're laughing at this, but like people that weren't on there, I don't think understood it as well as like you had to be on there a decent amount to really understand what makes it tick.
And that's when things started to go bad, and why I don't think that Twitter dying or kind of whimpering on its way out of its influence, because it's not going to just hard stop die one day. It's just its influence over time has diminished. And I do think that this is the year where it truly, I agree with The Verge's premise that 2023 was the year that it truly just died as an influential piece to what we do for a living and how people communicate and gather the news and everything else. And I actually think it's a good thing, because Brian Curtis a few years ago did a story on The Ringer. I think it was on The Ringer. It wasn't Grantland, but it was on The Ringer. I have to go back and find it. But the central premise was that Twitter should be credited as the executive producer for every talk show you see on ESPN, Fox Sports 1, and for a good chunk of sports talk radio. Because, you know, and again, this is another one of those things where you're forged by how you came up in the business. So when I started doing sports talk radio in my senior year at NC State in the fall of 2000, remember callers, people calling. The whole point was to get people fired up to call. And you would think that the people calling in was a sentiment of something had to happen. Oh, the coach has to be fired, or this guy's the best quarterback ever. But what you come to find out, the people who are willing to call a sports talk radio station are a very, very specific subset of the audience.
Right.
The general thought is about 1% of your audience at best would ever call into a radio station.
And to be honest, and no offense to callers, there are some that are at least somewhat entertaining, but they're like most people that listening can't stand the callers.
Of course.
They're like, who's this idiot? Why is he going on and on and on? Like, no one wants to listen to this person.
There's a reason why we stopped taking calls at one point in time, because you realize, what is this really about? And Twitter allowed you to pick and choose what you would read on the air.
Exactly.
Much like you get the text message line too. Like, I think that there are some sports talk radio stations, like I've told this to Kyle Bailey over at WFNZ, buddy, get off the text machine. Like, people are just losing their minds on the text machine. And you might find them amusing, but it's like
FNZ's text machine is wild.
It's FNZ's text machine. I envision it actually emitting smoke. Because of all the texts that it receives. But again, it gets back to that sentiment and warping what you think is actually going on in the world of sports.
Because you hear loud, angry people or like loud, whatever, like just you hear opinions that maybe aren't the mainstream, but they feel like the mainstream if there's enough of them. And I think we do get that. I think that has had a bleed over effect in areas that are not sports as well.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
But either way, like, yes, I think that that's something that we've all been guilty of at times. But like, yes, I think mass media, especially the people that aren't on Twitter all the time, absolutely are guilty of being like, oh, well, look at what all these people are saying on Twitter. That must be how people feel.
And then you realize too, where it's like this meltdown that's taking place, where it's the main character of the day. Like, you never wanted to wake up one day and be the main character on social media.
Like that lady who tweeted about like, what was it? Something about Africa.
And then she got on a plane.
Yeah.
Woo,
something bad. Oh no.
But what you come to find out is how quickly that stuff moves on. Too. Like, you think, people are losing their mind. Oh man, we got to get on this. And then the next day they've moved on to the next thing that, is the dress blue or black? Right. Is it Laura or Yanni? Like, we think that this is the hottest thing going right now. And it just, as I look back on it, I think to myself, how much time was wasted on a particular thing when it really was just a social media echo chamber that made it a thing. And if you and I can have this conversation,
right?
Because we're extremely online. But try talking to your spouse about that thing. Try talking about that with a friend who is not extremely online.
Insane.
And you make this reference and you're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Or like I'll read a tweet. So they'll be like, what are you laughing at? And I'll read a tweet and they'll be like, oh. And it's like, okay, I was like, I know this makes no sense to you. I understand that. I mean, I will say this. The one thing about Twitter that obviously was not good, even when it was good, even when Twitter was good, is like the harassment campaigns we've seen waged against women, minorities, all of that. Some of those got pretty serious. And some of those, I mean, I know people that have gone off Twitter because of how toxic it has been for them or for people they know. And it's not always a very pleasant place to be. And there are definitely opinions that you can tweet out on there that will cause a barrage of harassment in your mentions, especially now because security is way laxer. And so it can be an unpleasant place to be in that way. And in that way, that's the only aspect in which I won't miss it, because you tweet the wrong thing one time and you're going to have a bunch of stuff to sift through in your mentions that you don't always want to be reading about yourself.
Yeah. And to kind of start winding this conversation down, it's like, what's next, right? Yeah, I think you and I can both recognize.
That's where I get that, because there's nothing obvious to me.
Yeah. You and I can look at the good and the bad.
Yeah.
We've made friends,
I've made literal friends. I've been on vacation with a friend that I met on there. And we literally, I mean, I've made several friends from that website.
And it's helped our careers. But at the end, you realize it was a point of diminishing returns. It sucks. Like, I still instinctively want to go back to Twitter, but I know every time I go back, it's like, it's not the same. Why am I still coming back here? No, I'll still use it to promote the podcast, like that kind of stuff.
I'll still scroll through a timeline. Like, there's still enough people on there that it's like, I get something out of going when I go. But
so I guess the central question is it good that it's dying? Is it good that this era of social media is finally winding down and we're moving on to the next thing?
I don't think it is.
Why not?
I don't think it is for sports watching folks, because I think it made all of us more, not united. That's the wrong way of putting it, but it gave a central hub for everything. And you can follow who you can curate your feed. So you're getting exactly the kind of sports commentary that you want. You don't have to just listen to the broadcast. You know what I mean? Like, you can make snarky comments during the game and read other people's snarky comments during tell me that Twitter hasn't enhanced your enjoyment of sports, because it absolutely has mine. And just the thought of not being able to have a place where you can where I can tweet a GIF of something sad during a Panthers game or whatever.
or LeBron
joining walking out with the purse, which is one of my favorite GIFs of all time.
Or joining in on the jokes when you see Frank Beamer, arms up, 0-0 tie, walking off the field, being in the moment and just getting jokes off as quickly as you can with the hashtag GoACC.
I don't think I would have even found that game
had it not been for Twitter.
Right, because I was covering a basketball game when it was airing, but the tweets were just amazing. And I went back and watched the whole thing. I've watched it more than once.
You did an oral history on that game. Between Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, regulation 0-0.
Oh, sort of.
You at least attempted to.
Yeah, I did. I actually did I did a bit of a recap. It was just, again, it was one of those things where I could just write whatever I wanted. So I did. But yeah, I mean, that game was art to me. I explained why. I did one of those Bill Simmons-y things from the old Page 2 days where it was the live blog, except it wasn't live. It was my recap blog. That's kind of it was something in that format. That's what I did for that game.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel that going forward, we're never going to be able to replicate it, and I'm okay with it. I might actually find myself paying more attention to the actual game that I'm supposed to be watching.
I got better about that over the years.
Well, the moment that actually got me, right?
What?
I don't know if you were in the building for it. Several years ago, we were at Cameron Indoor Stadium for a basketball game, and they were doing the Oblivious cams. Remember the Oblivious cams?
Oh, I remember this happening. I'm not sure if I was in the building.
You might not
have
been there for it,
because guess where I found out about it? Twitter.
Well, I was on the oblivious cam, but essentially I was not engaged with what was going on in front of me, and they put me up on the scoreboard.
Well, that was probably during like an official timeout.
Doesn't matter. It made me realize, like, wow, I do spend a lot of time. In fact, like shout out to Ethan Hyman and Jack Morton and a lot of other our photog friends who have captured press row shots at Cameron. And there's something happening like a dunk. And what am I doing? I'm in front of my computer tweeting something or whatever. I'm like, I didn't actually see the play. I was one of those things where I hear the reaction and then I would pop up. Like, that's bad. That's not good. Like, you're there to watch the game. So now if you catch me at games, I don't bring my laptop out. I got my phone with me just in case, but I put my phone down and I'm watching the game.
I need the stat broadcast, so that's why.
Yeah, you are hooked on the stat broadcast.
And I tried not to tweet as much. I mean, it's been a while since I covered a game in person, but I mean, yeah, I tried to not do that as much, and just watch it, because especially when you're there in person, like there's a lot you would miss if you're not focusing. I mean, on TV it's tougher because you're not getting as close a view of the action anyway. But yeah,
Threads ain't it.
Really? I mean, I haven't been there. I have several follow requests because I set myself to private because I was like, I don't want to deal with I don't want to deal with whoever would be in my mentions. I follow all of these people on Instagram that I don't want to be following on Threads. And I'm just like, I don't feel like dealing with, there's too many social media platforms right now, honestly, too. And that's part of it, right? It's like people are like, you got to join TikTok and check out these videos.
No.
You got to go on Instagram. You got to go on Facebook.
No.
I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like doing all of these things.
The issue with TikTok, Reels, what we're doing on YouTube, podcast, that's all broadcast. The argument, the theory is that social media networks have gotten to a point where they are the broadcast channels. They are ABC, NBC, CBS of its time. You have your content creators instead of the actual traditional media outlets creating shows. You have content creators creating these things. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. You have a kid. They spend more time watching YouTube than they do actual television. My 15-year-old spends more time watching TikTok and Reels than he does actual television. That's the broadcast consumption. We're taking part in it, by the way. We've transitioned from using it as a tool to using the social media as a actual broadcast outlet for us, rather than news gathering, rather than kind of teasing stuff. No. This is the actual way you broadcast to your audience outside of traditional means. So to your point about TikTok, TikTok's work. Like if you're going to be good at TikTok, you have to put in some work.
Exactly. That's why I've never.
YouTube is in the same boat. You got to put in. YouTube is a full-time job.
That's the thing. It's too much work for me. Like Twitter, you could just fire off a tweet. Like,
it's just boom. I got this thought. It's 120 characters or whatever it was at the time. Boop, 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 done.
You got to get your ring light for the TikTok. You got to like edit, which I still don't know how to do. I need to learn somehow. So I don't know. But
I don't know where things are going. I'm trying with Threads. I'm at the point in my life at 44 where it's like I got to pick one thing and try to be good at it. And right now, the one thing that I'm just trying to like get better at Threads, get better at YouTube. Obviously, we're doing the podcast thing. We'll do with Reels, with Instagram and whatnot. But we're never going to get that Twitter again. Threads isn't going to be. It's too fractured. There's just way too. You got people that are on Mastodon. You got people that are on Blue Sky or whatever it's called.
People are still on Mastodon?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't understand Mastodon, so I kind of gave it up.
That's why for the in-season tournament.
Sports people are on Blue Sky, at least the ones I love the most. A lot of them are on there, but like.
It's not the same.
There's not enough people on there. Yeah.
Like there's been a concerted effort from Meta to get a lot of the sports insiders over to Threads. Like they've made this big deal. They clearly have some deal with Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN to do a weekly Q&A. Adam Schefter's posting a hell of a lot more on Threads.
I follow like Love Island UK contestants on Instagram. I don't need to see their threads.
No, you don't. Because some people just don't have interesting things to say. But look, I bring up Adrian Wojnarowski. He ruined NBA drafts.
Oh, yeah.
He ruined NBA drafts.
Well, and that especially didn't, you know what especially contributed to that? I think, not to get on a whole different discussion, I'm not, but like the fact that so many people switched to streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're live tweeting a game, almost from the time of Twitter's inception, because like I think feels like that's around the time people started cutting the cord.
It reworked how I watch sports too, in that regard at home.
So like you're literally part of the reason the draft was spoiled. I mean, I'm not saying he was tweeting it that close to the pick because it was usually before that.
Before the pick.
But it was still like that contributes to the delay too. Like you're literally not finding out until like a good 6 minutes after Woj has tweeted it.
I'll say this with that streaming aspect of it and having like a 30-second to 90-second delay.
Yeah.
I would see that something had happened on Twitter and it made me go, okay, I'm going to make this work for me. Rather than being mad, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe like the game is over and it ended on this shot, or the game is over and it ended on this crazy touchdown. Cool. Rather than being mad about it, it allowed me to go, oh, this is going to happen. Let me watch it differently. I'm not watching it to be surprised. I'm not watching it for the moment. I end up watching it to see, okay, why did this happen? And who broke coverage?
Yeah.
Did somebody slip
right,
before the
what to watch for. Exactly.
I know what I'm looking to watch for. I enjoyed that.
I
enjoyed that.
It's what's got me through this Panther season with whatever shreds of my sanity remain is the fact that I will now, that's what I did all last week. I'm like refreshing because I'm like, what am I going to be seeing? What horror awaits me on the next play? Oh, an interception? Great. Now I know that. Now I can prepare myself mentally and I can watch the play unfold and figure out how it happened. You know what I mean? Like, then you don't even have to rewind it. You don't have to wait for the replay.
You want to pour one out?
Literally?
I mean, I got beer in the fridge.
I mean, where would we pour it in here though?
Yeah, probably a good idea. Probably don't want to do that.
It's a lot of like electronics.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, definitely not something
also,
we
it
want to
smell.
do. Good point. We get on the carpet. We want to do that. But yeah, I'm just 2024. It's not like I'm going to be off Twitter completely, but I think we can all agree that it's never going to be the same. Never going to be the same. And it's not about any one particular person. Like somebody else could come in and buy Twitter. I think the ship has sailed. The ship was sailing anyway. It's just like the pandemic, things get accelerated in these big moments.
We'll see.
If somebody were else to buy Twitter, it'll never be the same.
Well, they could be hailed as a hero.
I think people are moving on. And I think that's okay. I think we'll all be better for it, Lauren. I really do think we'll all be better for it.
Listen, I grew up with away messages. Okay. Twitter was my away message.
You can do that now on Instagram.
Not really.
All right. Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2024.